The desert stretched endlessly, golden and quiet except for the faint rustle of wind brushing through. Dry grass and the creak of saddle leather. Ethan Cole, a rugged cowboy known across the frontier for his stubborn will and sharp aim, rode toward what was left of his ranch, or rather, what had once been his pride. The barns were burned, the cattle scattered, and the land scarred by a raid no one had seen coming. For days he had searched for the men who did it, but all he found was emptiness and a growing anger inside him. Then fate led him to something he never expected, or rather someone. He first saw her at dusk near the edge of the canyon. She stood tall, still as stone, her black hair flowing freely, eyes like obsidian watching him without fear. Her name was Aiyana, a young Apache woman from a nearby tribe. She had been following the trail of the same raiders who had destroyed Ethan's ranch, the same men who had stolen horses and sacred items from her people. Their fates had crossed under the blood-red sky, and though they came from worlds that never mixed, their goals aligned that night. At first, Ethan didn't trust her. His mind was clouded with suspicion, fed by years of conflict and misunderstanding between settlers and her tribe. But when he saw her tracking skills, the way she read the sand, noticed broken twigs, and understood every whisper of the land, he realized she could lead him to the men responsible. They rode together silently, tension between them heavy but unspoken. Aiyana spoke little, her voice calm and steady when she did. "You're not the only one they hurt," she said once. And Ethan could only nod, realizing vengeance had many faces. Days passed as they followed the trail deeper into the Badlands. Ethan learned to respect her way of seeing things, how she didn't rush, didn't waste words, and trusted the earth more than her eyes. She, in turn, saw that beneath his rough exterior was a man broken by loss, but not yet beaten. One night by the fire, as the flames flickered between them, Ethan asked quietly, "Why help me?" Aiyana looked at the stars and replied, "Because justice has no color." Those words sank deep into his heart. Their journey reached its turning point when they discovered the raiders' camp hidden in a narrow canyon. The men were ruthless, armed, and too many to face alone. But Aiyana devised a plan with sharp precision. Using the desert itself and the rocks, the shadows, and the sound of the wind, they struck at dawn. Ethan fought fiercely, driven by rage and the memory of his burned ranch, while Aiyana moved like a spirit of vengeance, swift and silent. When the dust settled, the raiders were defeated. As Ethan stood amidst the smoke and silence, he realized it was not his strength that won the fight, but her courage and wisdom. Aiyana tended to his wounds when it was over, her touch gentle but firm. She said nothing of victory. To her it was simply balance restored. Together they buried the fallen and freed the horses. When they returned to his land, the ranch lay in ruins, but the air felt different, not empty but waiting to be reborn. That evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Ethan turned to her. "You saved my ranch," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "And I owe you more than gold." Aiyana looked at him, her face unreadable for a moment, then softened. "You owe me nothing, cowboy," she said. "You owe your land care and your heart truth." She started to walk away, but Ethan stepped closer. "Then stay," he said. "Not because I ask you to, but because maybe together we can make something worth saving." The silence that followed was long, filled with the soft hum of wind through the dry grass. Aiyana turned her gaze toward the horizon, the endless desert, where stories of pain and hope were written in dust, then nodded once. The world between them had shifted. Two lives, once divided by blood and borders, now shared the same promise of rebuilding. And somewhere deep in that quiet space between them, something new began. Not spoken, not named, but real. That night, under the fading glow of a new dawn, Ethan rebuilt his first fence post, and Aiyana watched him with quiet strength. The land had taken much from both of them, but it had also given them each other, a reason to start again, a bridge between worlds once torn apart. The story of the cowboy and the Apache girl was only beginning, but it had already carved its mark in the heart of the frontier. Days turned into weeks, and the barren ranch slowly began to breathe again. Ethan and Aiyana worked side by side, each sunrise marking another small victory against the ghosts of the past. The fields that once lay silent began to stir with signs of life. a few horses grazing near the corral, the faint hammering of rebuilt fences, and the smoke of a modest fire rising from the chimney of a half-fixed cabin. Ethan had always thought of the ranch as his alone, a symbol of his father's hard work and his own pride, but now every board and every drop of sweat carried a shared story. He'd look across the yard and see Aiyana moving with quiet grace, feeding the horses, mending leather, or simply standing by the open plains as if she could hear the earth's heartbeat itself. Though she spoke little, her presence had a way of filling the silence with meaning. Sometimes Ethan would catch her humming old tribal tunes, melodies carried by the wind. They reminded him of things words could never say, of loss, of strength, of memories buried deep but not forgotten. Slowly he came to understand that rebuilding wasn't just about wood and nails. It was about finding peace with what had been broken. And she, without ever saying so, was teaching him how. One evening, while the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in shades of fire, Ethan brought out 2 tin cups of coffee. He handed one to Aiyana, who took it with a nod. They sat by the fence, watching the sky turn to gold. "You ever think of leaving?" he asked after a while. Aiyana took a slow sip, her eyes never leaving the distance. "A bird stays until it learns what the wind means," she said softly. Ethan smiled faintly, not fully understanding her words, but feeling them settle deep inside. As time passed, they grew closer, though neither dared to name what was forming between them. It was built on shared silence, on trust born of hardship, and on moments that didn't need explaining. When Ethan would ride out to gather the lost cattle, Aiyana would watch from the ridge, her gaze protective yet distant. When she spoke of her people, her tone carried both sorrow and pride, the kind of history that never fades but shapes who you are. Ethan listened with respect, realizing that the world had been unfair to both of them in different ways. He had lost his home to violence. She had lost her way of life to the same kind of greed, and somehow in that shared pain, they found connection. But peace in the frontier never lasted long. One morning, a cloud of dust appeared on the horizon. Riders, maybe 6 or 7 of them, armed and moving fast. Ethan's jaw tightened as he recognized one of them, Jed Harper, a man he once called a friend, but who had since turned outlaw, the same man who had sold him out to the raiders before. Rage flared inside him, but Aiyana's steady hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Anger blinds," she said quietly. "See before you strike." They waited until the riders arrived, the air thick with tension. Jed dismounted with a smirk, spitting into the dirt. "Didn't think you'd crawl out of the ashes, Cole," he sneered. Ethan's hand hovered near his gun, but he didn't draw. Not yet. "You came back to finish what you started," he said, his voice calm but sharp. Jed chuckled. "No, I came for what's mine. Half this land used to be under my name. But maybe I'll take her too," he added, glancing toward Aiyana. That was his mistake. Before Ethan could move, Aiyana's knife flashed, swift as lightning, embedding itself in the wooden post beside Jed's hand. The riders tensed, guns half drawn, but she stood unmoving, eyes cold and fierce. "You take nothing here," she said, her voice low but steady. For a moment, even the wind seemed to pause. Jed's smirk faded. He knew he was outmatched, not just by her weapon but by the fire in her eyes. With a growl, he signaled his men, and they turned their horses around, retreating into the desert dust. When the danger passed, Ethan exhaled the breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He turned to her, awe and gratitude in his eyes. "You saved my life again," he said quietly. She shook her head. "No," she replied. "I saved your peace. You were about to lose it." Her words struck deeper than any bullet could. He knew she was right. Vengeance had once ruled him. But now, standing beside her, he found something stronger than revenge. That night the stars shimmered above the quiet land. The fire crackled softly between them, and Ethan finally spoke what had long been building in his heart. "You saved my ranch," he said, repeating the words from before. But this time his tone carried more meaning, more truth. "And I owe you more than gold, Aiyana. You gave me back what I thought I'd lost, and myself." She looked at him, eyes reflecting the firelight, and for the first time she smiled. "Then keep it," she said. "Gold fades. The heart remembers." The silence that followed was not empty, but full of respect, of connection, of something beyond the reach of words. From that night on, Ethan and Aiyana worked not just to rebuild a ranch, but to build a home, one born from two worlds that had once stood apart. The land healed, as did they, teaching each other that sometimes salvation comes not from what you own, but from who stands beside you when everything falls apart. Their story spread quietly across the frontier, a tale of a cowboy and an Apache girl, of loss turned into strength, and of a bond that defied everything the world said should divide them. Some said it was luck, others called it destiny, but those who truly knew whispered it was something rarer, understanding. And as the seasons passed, the ranch thrived once more, standing strong beneath the endless desert sky, not built on wealth, but on something far more lasting: trust, courage, and a promise born from a single moment when a cowboy said, "You saved my ranch, now I owe you more than gold."